Welcome everybody, it's Rev. It's about that time for a pre-Edison War League tier list. And I'm doing something a little bit different. I want to respect your time, so I filled out a lot of the stuff that I don't think is even worth discussion to save some time. And I am going to focus on the real decks in this format, and we're going to add a lot more nuance to what frankly matters. Again, this is kind of a competitive channel, so if you want nuanced takes on Flamvel, go elsewhere. So I just wanted to save you some time. If you want to save even more time, I would recommend listening to James Ark. I used to listen to James Ark. I still do. I just used to too. He has a tier list. It's a pretty good one. But we're going to get into some of my thoughts and what some of the talking points and meta developments are over the last, I don't know when the last tier list I did, maybe like 10 months or something like that. So here we go. Let's jump in. Now the first thing I want to address is kind of the ordering within, like, actually the very first thing I want to address is this. This tier is ass. 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 Don't play these decks. Again, within, I'll just like try to do this in like 30, 40 seconds. The ass tier, these are just not good decks. They're equally ass and cope. Within the ass tier, there's no particular ordering. I mean, within these, I mean, maybe like Fairy Pure is probably the best out of them. Like Flamvel maybe next. I don't know. Maybe like even Fish OTK, I guess, could like be moved up to tier 2, but in tier 2, I do think there is, for part of this, some ordering. So I'd say at the top of tier 2, I think Amaryllis is probably the best tier 2 deck. I think it just has enough going for it with an alternate win condition. Titanial's a very good card, and this deck does set it up, which can be frustrating in certain matchups, like into Vayu. I just think if you're running a plant deck, there are better choices at this point. I think Machina Control is just a like super like Hamster Raikou Caius deck, which, I mean, if you run like 3 Hamster, 3 Caius, like in the Raikous, and like a Charge or something, I mean, that's just like a good enough deck to be in tier 2 kind of on its own. Machina Gadget, I think, probably does rank at number 3. I am convinced that this deck is underplayed. I don't think it's a top tier deck by any means, but I think it accomplishes a game plan similar to Hero Beat, which is that it's not going to non-game it. Well, I'll take that back. Hero Beat non-games itself all the time. But the idea of Hero Beat was to be kind of like a low, like a high floor, low ceiling type deck. I think Machina Gadget does it better. Somehow it's more consistent, and it has a higher ceiling. And it, like the whole point was kind of just to not non-game yourself. You have a bunch of in-engine plus ones, so I think it's definitely got potential. Unfortunately, I don't think there's enough deck building flexibility for this to be like really optimized much more than it is. And then the rest of these I don't think really warrant that much discussion. Like Dragon Deck, it runs like Hamster Raikou Caius. Like this is a high ceiling thing that runs dark shit. Zombie decks I think are good enough to be in like the top portion of tier 2. Like the zombie quote unquote engine I think is just good enough. Hero Beat, which is just a bad deck. I think just it's going to reverse sack enough, and the concept of a reverse sack is that it's not necessarily you getting lucky, it's your opponent getting unlucky. And I think in Edison, any deck that has consistent proactive pressure can win enough games to kind of be within tier 2, and that's going to be a topic of discussion a little bit later. And then again, not to waste your time, like, am I going to say like, oh, Diva Hero is better than Chainburn and like give you some nuanced take on like X-Saber? No, I don't think that's really worth your time. Like, I didn't put much thought into the ordering of these, but I'd say this top row, I would stand by that, you know, this is roughly what I believe the top of tier 2 to look like in order, Amaryllis being best, and then Diva Hero, or Hero Beat variants being at the top, and then everything else kind of below it in terms of tiering. So let's jump into the real discussion on what some of my thoughts are and what I'm kind of hearing people say. In tournament results. So I think Lightsworn, we'll just get this out of the way. I think this actually does belong in tier 2. Maybe I should have put this up before, but I think it's I've talked about this before. It checks like all of the boxes that you'd ever want in a deck. Like it creates a bunch of non-games. You get to run like hand traps. It plays from hand. It has arguably all of the best boss monsters like in the format. I just think there are consistency issues and it has hard lose conditions like deck dev at times. So I don't think it is all that great. It is a deck that can beat you. I mean, any deck can beat you if they're drawing above average and you're drawing average. I think this deck um, is honestly overplayed. I think there are just better ways to do what it's trying to do, which leads me into my next point, which is the Lightsworn variants, Lightsworn Pure and Twilight Lightsworn. Personally, I think Lightsworn Pure is the better deck. Twilight Lightsworn, without a doubt, has a significantly higher ceiling. But I think like engine maxing, and this is a topic we're going to talk about like a lot more, is like the builds of late are just you max the Lightsworn engine and you just do Lightsworn things, and that's going to get you enough games. And if you're running a little bit hot, you can top tournaments. And I think Lightsworn still to this day, in my mind, is by far the most underplayed deck in Edison format. That's not to say that I think it's an S tier deck. I don't think it'll ever be an S tier deck, but really the point of Lightsworn, and I always get pushback from good players on this. They're like, Lightsworn, it's not consistent enough. It gives you no gameplay flexibility. Yeah, it has a high ceiling, but I don't get the opportunity to outplay my opponent. And I'm like, yes, exactly. And that's why it's so underplayed. Like, good players look at this deck and don't want to touch it. But I really do think, like, if you're like a slightly below average player, so that means like 50% and below, like it's game theory optimal to just bring Lightsworn to a tournament. Because if you're bad, which by definition most people are, and that's you, the viewer, like you're probably bad if you're watching this just by statistics alone, you should probably play Lightsworn. And like good players just can't understand that like you have to pick a deck that allows you, like not like some abstract like person or idea of like what's tier 1 or S tier, but like you as the player to give the highest chance of winning. And Lightsworn in its gameplay is so unbelievably hard to fuck up that most players should be entering tournaments with Lightsworns. Like it has everything going for it. It's very easy to pilot. Games are over generally pretty quickly. You get the best boss monster in the format. Other than maybe like, I don't know, like Avarice or something, but JD is probably the best boss monster in the format. It makes Dad look like Child's Play. Like, think about how much better of a card JD is. It's not once per turn. It has way better stats. It's way more easy to summon. It's way more flexible to summon. You don't need an exact number of things in the graveyard. It mills for you. It's at 2. You can recur it. It's insane. And then on top of that, you get to run the best hand trap in the format, which is Honest. You get to run the best draw card in the format by a mile, which is Recharge. You get the best search card in the format, which is Charge. You get the best tribute monster in the format, which is Celestia. It's just, I don't see like what the disconnect is. Like you get the ability to play very proactively and end games quickly against players that are better than you, which if you're average or below average is exactly what you want. Like, Lightsworn just has so much going for it that I really do think more players should enter with it and just hope it's their day. Because if you're really being honest with yourself and you're just like an average player, you're just not going to like outplay people. And like Lightsworn just doesn't give you the flexibility to be outplayed or to outplay, which is what you want if you're bad. If you're good, you want as much flexibility as possible, but the stark reality is not everyone's a great player. A lot of people are bad. So that's my tangent on Lightsworn. So to add a little bit more nuance on Twilight, I think they both, again, get to run some nice floodgates in the side. They get to create a lot of non-games, but I do think just for consistency issues alone, I prefer Lightsworn. I could be proven wrong. I've gotten my shit pushed in with Twilight, plenty of times. But from playing both, I think just the ability to have like generally better opening hands gives Lightsworn the edge. So what else do we want to talk about with Lightsworn? There will probably be a topic I think I'm missing, but I think that rounds it out for now. Blackwing Hybrid. Now this is the traditional hybrid, which is just like basically slapping in like 2 or 3 Greffers in a Blackwing deck. I think this is at the bottom of tier 1. It just kind of is a Blackwing deck, and occasionally you get more grave flexibility. I don't think there's any particular reason to run this over pure Blackwings or Vayu. I think it's kind of a worse version of both. And if you're scratching your head, if you've watched my channel, I'm a huge advocate of hybrid Blackwings, but I think most hybrid Blackwing builds historically have been built incorrectly, and I think the just lazy version of slap some Greffers in is not really worth running. So I'll add a lot more nuance on what I'll call Rev Hybrid down here, and where I think that resides. Now, Dream Frog. I think this is right next to Blackwing Hybrid in tier 1. I think any frog deck, and I say this on all my tier lists, any frog deck is at a minimum at kind of tier 2. There are just so many different frog variants, I kind of just tossed them in here, but honestly, any frog deck, I'll just say any frog deck is at a minimum, I'll just say Frog Monarchs is the stand-in for frogs, is at a minimum tier 1. The frog engine is just so ahead of its time for Edison that how could you argue that Substitute plus Caius plus Swap plus Treeborns and Dupe, that'll get you far enough in any matchup. And you can win against anything with just a frog engine, unless you're doing something heinously stupid, fucking Royal Decree frogs or some shit. But if you're playing even a half-baked frog list, it's probably somewhere in tier 1. Now Dream Frog, I think it does have some interesting things going for it. I think in terms of utilizing the frog engine, I do like that you do get to main deck Monarchs as opposed to Forgs, which doesn't. I like that you get a bunch of side flexibility. You get the Vanities, which Forgs doesn't. You get additional trap flexibility. You get Soul Exchanges, which are very useful in certain matchups. I do think that the deck really suffers from some somewhat typical frog issues, which is that you find yourself a lot of times with frogs way ahead on cards, but your actual functional card advantage isn't very good. And you kind of get in this game state a lot of times where you're up on a lot of cards, but you just can't proactively put enough pressure on your opponent. And you find yourself just summoning a swap frog and attacking or poking with it, or if they even summon a beat stick, there are a lot of situations where you kind of just allow your opponent to get back in the game, which is why I think Dream Frog, as powerful it is, and the amount of really good cards that you get to run, I don't think it's anywhere near an S tier deck. I think it suffers from a lot of classic frog problems. I also think Pot of Avarice, just as a card in frogs, other than in Forgs, or combo frogs, whatever you want to call them, is extremely flawed. People say oh, it's a +1, but it's functionally really not a +1. You're adding back a bunch of cards in your deck which you typically don't want to draw. I know you can set up Duplocks again and get more juice out of Substitute, but you're typically drawing 2 cards, but it's really 1.5, just because the quality of the cards you're drawing, because you're shuffling back the frogs, is typically a little bit lower. In addition to that, it's a hard brick at the beginning of the game. So while I think Avarice is an extremely good card, and I think Dream Frogs was built around that card correctly, I think it as a card is just balanced enough that it's not the be-all end-all that people claim Avarice is. Still a very good deck. I think it has a lot of flexibility. It's very skill intensive, which I do like. I just think if you're going to go all out on really eking out every conceivable advantage of the Frog engine, Forgs is just going to be a better deck. So let's talk about Forgs. I think this is our first entry into S tier. I can't move it up here. There we go. Into S tier. This deck is absolutely insane. I don't think there's a doubt in anyone's mind that it has by far the highest game 1 win rate of any deck. The issue with Forgs is that post side, its win rate goes massively down. And there are really two iterations of this deck. The first is the conversion side, so you convert into things like Caius and some, chainables like Regeki Break. The other version is non-conversion. Now, as much as I don't think just looking at results is all that useful, as of late, the non-conversion sides have been doing better. And personally, this has kind of been the deck I've been playing the most over the last month or so. I think if you're just gonna do the unfair Forg stuff and try to kill them, I really do think that the non-conversion side is probably the way you want to go. The conversion side, yeah, it definitely helps you in bird matchups, but other than that, I mean, you're really just running a significantly worse Dream Frog list post side in a lot of matchups. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done on this deck, and the frustrating thing is a lot of Forg players really think they just solved everything and their work is done, which I wholeheartedly disagree with. I think this deck can still be labbed and it can still be optimized. There are cards that, in my opinion, are especially if you're on non-conversion, 100% staples like Beal's Frog, which still aren't finding its way into certain decks. People are cutting Treeborns, which I think is a massive mistake. So if you're running the non-conversion side, I really do think it comes to the point I brought up earlier, which is engine maxing. If you're just going to try to break the Frog engine, max the Frog engine, play all of them. Play the Beals, play 2 Treeborns, play a suite of 3 dupes, play the Uni. They all have a place, and when you play more Frogs, it makes so many other parts of your engine supplement cards better. So it makes your Pot of Avarice better. It makes your salvages a lot better. It makes your swap pitch add sub back with salvage better. It makes your Murray better. I think especially the lesson we've learned with Lightsworn is don't dilute your engine. Just add more engine cards and build around the engine as opposed to trying to cut into your engine and do other shit. The more Lightsworn cards people play, in Lightsworn decks, the better results they've had. The more Frog cards you play in a Frog deck, or Forgs especially, the better results you're going to have. So I think this is going to be a recurring theme, especially when we talk about Blackwings too. So let's talk about Frog Hero. I think this deck is probably second in contention for the amount of copium. People way cope on Forgs and the power level of it, even if it is an S tier decks. I think people just overestimate it. Frog Hero, people are putting it in they call it the big 3. That's ridiculous in my opinion. Frogs is not an S tier deck. It's by far the best probably turn 1 deck. You get swaps, you get e-calls, you get rotos, you get stratos, you get subs. It has a good turn 1 opener. But another thing I want to talk about is any deck that gets worse post side, unless you have an insane game 1 win rate, can't possibly be S tier. The best decks in this format all get better post side. So the bird decks like Vayu and Blackwings all get better post side. Hero Frogs in virtually every matchup gets worse post side, and you do factually play more post side games than you do game 1s. So I think that's why for the longest time the best decks have always been the bird decks. It's just a statistical advantage that you get to run really great anti-meta cards like Deck Dev and Oppression, and you're again mathematically going to play more games 2 and 3 than you are game 1. So I believe me, I have played a ton of Hero Frogs. I don't hate it by any means, but I mean, I think if you spent enough time playing the top 6 or 7 decks in the format, Hero Frog, you very much so feel at a disadvantage when you're playing compared to something like if you're playing Force or like Vayu Turbo. It has a ton of things going for it. It's an amazing deck, but I'll stand by. I don't think there is a big three in Edison. And if there is a big three, it's Forgs as a stand-in for Hero Frogs. I think it does a lot of things significantly better than Hero Frogs does, albeit a very different style of gameplay. I think Hero Frogs, again, is a fantastic control deck, but this format has gotten so fast and so high rolly that, like, if you're just kind of like sitting back and waiting to accumulate like card advantage, I just don't think that's the way the format is going to be played moving forward, other than if you're like in a very non-competitive environment like low ladder or like locals. Like if you're really looking to like gun it and like be at the top tables at a tournament, or like you're playing week in and week out in like War League, or you're at like high ladder, your deck has to be fast and your deck has to be proactive in some manner, whether or not that proactivity is like summon and attack like a Blackwing deck, or proactive in like ending the game with like a Ford combo or a Giga combo. I don't think you can kind of just like sit back and let the game come to you like you used to be able to. Now GBs, this is a deck that was like, honestly, everyone was putting it in S tier for the longest time in Edison, and I think people just picked up the deck and realized that this deck probably has more like engine support than like any other deck in the format. Like if you just like go in DB and type in like Gladiator Beast and sort by Edison cards, like there are just so many like fucking Gladiator Beast cards, and they have like custom cards, like fucking, they get to like cheat out stuff with Test Tiger. They get like an insane counter with like War Chariot. They do get like probably the best two boss monsters in like the format, like other than maybe like JD, but like Heraclinos is an auto win most of the time. Avarice is ridiculous, and it like tags in and out and like it lets you go like plus fucking 3 a lot of times. So GBs does have like just an insane amount of support that was printed up until Edison. I do think the deck has problems, and I think another thing that we're going to talk about in terms of like how quote unquote like professionalized the deck is, I don't think there's like any like good fucking Gladiator Beast players or like lists. Like nobody's labbing this, and like the people that are playing it are playing like fucking 43 cards, like 44 cards. Like you play 40 cards in this deck, and somebody needs to like put in the time to make like the like quote unquote like sizzle 41, or like let's call it GB 40. That's like an actual good cohesive perfect side plan GB deck, and I think the deck could like have significantly more results if people that play GBs weren't so fucking stupid and brain dead. Like, what's so hard about playing 40 cards? Like, there's literally no reason to not play 40 cards. And like, they're not even fucking playing like the search spell. Like, how are you not playing the fucking search spell? Like, half the times you lose with GB is because your GB isn't big enough, or like you don't see your fucking ready, or not ready. What the fuck's his name? The Wing Beast guy. How am I forgetting his name right now? The guy that tags into Gizaris, the wind one. But like, how is that not good? Like, I just don't really understand. Like, Prisma does part of that job, but like not the full picture. Like, you want to run like the spell search card. So I think GBs, especially considering how divisive some of its matchups are, is undoubtedly a tier 1 deck. I would put it right behind Lightsworn. Like, if you get good bracket luck with GBs, you can win. Now, if you're wondering whether or not I think Gladiator Beast, like pure quote unquote, or combo is better, I think there's probably just a middle ground where you might like have a Prisma or two, and then you just like have a very good, well thought out like spell and trap lineup. But I don't necessarily know which one is better. I think this deck is just largely unsolved. It's incredibly powerful, and the people that play the deck just don't really know their head from their ass. So Dragon Turbo. I think this undoubtedly is, I was going to say the highest ceiling deck of the format, but it's definitely not. It's pretty up there though. I would put it right here in tier 1. I think if you're going to try to end the game and do wombo combo things, there's pretty much no excuse not to run Forgs. I think the one thing I do like about Dragon Turbo, at least the way it's traditionally built, is that you do have a little bit more side flexibility to both stay combo and then also combat really tough matchups like GB, which Forgs doesn't have the ability to do. The other thing about Dragon Turbo is I think there are like a decent amount of games where we can kind of play like the mid-range gameplay, but not as much as Giga or Forgs. Like Forgs can quite easily set up like a dupe block behind a Stardust or like just a handful of like synchros behind like a dupe or something like that and like just kind of play the game post side. Giga as well, like just with like fertilizer alone has like a mid-range game plan, and sometimes you're like just one card away from like building an extremely intimidating board that if it doesn't get answered will continually plus 1 or 2 every turn. So I think for that reason Dragon Turbo, albeit a very like high ceiling like good deck, like I think anybody, well not anybody, but like this could easily win like major tournaments, but I just don't think like if you're trying to do that like wombo combo type stuff, you should be playing Dragon Turbo at this point. Which leads us to Giga. I think this deck obviously is incredibly powerful. I honestly would put it behind GBs. I think if you're running hot and like you set up your recurring like +1s like turn 1 or 2, it's very, very difficult for most decks outside of like maybe Blackwings to break that. The issue that I do have with it though is the deck, in my opinion, is still under construction, and I know a lot of people like Chess Prime are putting in a lot of work to the deck to like see if they can increase that consistency or not non-game themselves as much, which I think is promising. Like I don't know what the answer to deck building is, but at least where it stands right now, unfortunately, the deck is not consistent enough to be S tier. I think if whether or not it ends up being like UFO turtles or like some like supplemental draw engine, I think this deck very easily could move up on my tier list, just considering how powerful it is. But in its current state, it just frankly is not consistent enough, and that's just facts. Now, Blackwings. This is honestly the deck that prompted me to like want to make this tier list because people are saying like all over Discords and in like chats and stuff like, oh, like Blackwings is dead, like it's like not like winning major events, and like as much as I hate people just relying on like who won a tournament to like say what the best deck is, like it was just like a month ago, like this deck won like 3 majors, all 3 majors in the same weekend. I think it was like both of the European Ultimate Time Wizards and like something in the US. It usually takes a lot of top spots, and then there's like occasionally a bracket where like there are no Blackwing decks which convert. But I think undoubtedly this is an S tier deck. Like this, if you're putting this deck below S tier, I just don't really think you understand the format. Like it's a very, very good deck, and just because at this point like there's ebbs and flows on when it tops or wins, like doesn't mean like Blackwings is dying. I do think though a part of this is really the direction that Blackwings are headed. I think unfortunately, and this is kind of like counterintuitive considering like the work we've seen with a lot of decks and like how they've developed over time, Blackwing decks are getting worse over time. Like people are starting to like cut Vayu. Like if you have one Vayu in your Blackwing deck, like you just don't like, you don't get it. Like if you have 2 Bora in your Blackwing deck, your pure Blackwing deck, you don't get it. Like you need to run all of the Blackwing cards and then 2 Vayu. Like there's absolutely no excuses. The games you lose with Blackwings are because you don't see like your beaters, which are Shura and Bora. The other games you lose are because you can't, like when you actually get the advantage, whether it's a Shura resolution or like a Blizzard Summon Whirlwind Search, are because you can't like extend with Vayu. Like there's absolutely no excuse not to be running 2 Vayus. And as much of a fan of Gores I am, like if you're cutting the Vayu and adding a Gores, like that to me is just absolutely insane. If you really want to run Gores, which it could be correct, by the way, like I'm not saying it's wrong, but like just add it to the list and don't cut the Vayu. Like it's way, way too important for your game plan. And I think as a Blackwing main, like the biggest mistake I've made over my years as a Blackwing player was too frequently siding out Vayu. And additionally, like occasionally just running one Vayu in my Blackwing decks. The opportunity cost of not having a Vayu to extend with, whether or not it's a Whirlwind Search or like a Whirlwind Depression Chain Block or a Shura Resolution, the opportunity cost of not having the ability to do that is way, way higher than just drawing the Vayu when you don't necessarily want it. Like it's not even particularly close. Like the amount of OTKs you get with just having like a Vayu engrave and like a Brio play or whatever it might be is just way too high. I'll stand my ground on this. Like you have to run 2 Vayu and you have to run as many other Blackwings as possible. And if you want to add Gores, make some room in the side or just add it as your 20th monster. Don't cut the Vayu. The other thing that I'm seeing is I think side decks with Blackwings have consistently been getting worse over time as well. And as a studier of Blackwings, the funny thing to me is like the best Blackwing builds that have like had results are Yondaimes and Ludovico Rizos. And those were like early Blackwing like builds, and they were so good. Like they were just so far ahead of their time. Like the only mistake they were making, honestly, is like occasionally, like the early Blackwing decks didn't run Torrential, which at this point is kind of inexcusable. But like, it's so weird that like their early Blackwing decks, if you look at them, were so good, and then we've like kind of retraced our steps. It was like 1 step forward, like 2 steps back, and like if you just played like one of their old lists and like just played a torrential, like you're going to be miles ahead of other Blackwing lists the way they're currently being built. And there are a lot of like even side choices that are just extremely, extremely bad in my opinion. Now that brings us to Vayu Turbo. In terms of results, I don't think there's any question that this has been the winningest and most successful deck of Edison to date. I don't think, frankly, it's like in a tier of its own. And this kind of comes full circle. If you watch my like last 2 tier lists, there were points in 2024 where people were saying Vayu is dead. They were saying this is not a good time for Vayu. The format has developed to a point where Vayu Turbo is not positioned well. And that I called out. I said it's insane. I said you're absolutely insane if you think Vayu isn't one of the best decks of the format. And what do you know? I was proven right. I don't think it took all that much brain power to see through that. Like this is the issue with people that kind of just like sheepishly follow like trends. Like they see Vayu maybe have like a bad few months and they think the deck is dead, or like it doesn't convert well and it doesn't have like tournament wins maybe for a short stretch and they think the deck is dead. I think that's exactly is what is happening with Blackwing right now. Despite Blackwing probably it might have won the most majors this year. I don't know, but it's at least like the top like 2 or 3. But it's just kind of funny how things like ebb and flow, and like people's opinions are so easily swayed by like what wins a tournament on any given tournament. But undoubtedly, Vayu is one of the best decks of the format. The thing about Vayu is I don't think. Well, I'm not going to say I don't think. I'm going to say I know that Vayu doesn't have any like real hard counters. Blackwings does, Forgs does, but Vayu Turbo in terms of resiliency and like matchup spread is absolutely fantastic. Like it's just, and that's why James Ark built it that way. Like I think we all need to thank James Ark, that nice guy named James Ark, that nice guy we all know and love, James Ark, for building Vayu Turbo the way he did, because it not only gives you free wins, but just doesn't non-game itself as much as basically any other deck in the format. Now, the one thing I do want to talk about with Vayu Turbo is I do think the biggest weakness of the deck is RPS. It's a deck that doesn't necessarily need you to go first to win, of course, but like the difference between you going first and second with Vayu Turbo is monumental. I think the other thing that Vayu Turbo has going for it is I think by far it's the most professionalized deck of the format. Like even the deck building choices of like a Vayu Turbo list, which I don't necessarily like, they're still like 98% of the way there. Like they're very, very close to being optimal, and I think they're getting better over time. The one thing that I think I do disagree with is I think, like, at a bare minimum, all Vayu decks should be playing a third Grepher, at least in the side. And then if not the main, and just like if you're going to go with the main, like just don't side it out. I think that the card is just too good, and I wouldn't necessarily call it like a deck building mistake. I think it's just like a very small change that Vayu could make to like just even push it over the edge more. Like you kind of always want to see a Grepher in your opener, and it just it there are so many games you play with Vayu where you're just like one Grepher away from like doing the thing. You're like one Grepher away from being like way ahead. You're like one Grepher away where you like know you can stick it and just like start pitching shit and just build up like ridiculous return plays, ridiculous burial plays, or just like honestly like having an additional poke. I think the other weakness outside of RPS with Vayu is that because you're both running kind of like a defensive control engine, which is like Hamster Raikou Caius, and a more proactive engine, which is like the Grepher Arma like Vayu package, sometimes you just draw the wrong part of your engine at the wrong time. Like for instance, if you're drawing like your hamsters and Raikous versus a frog deck, you'd very much prefer like the like Vayu Grepher part of your engine, like Armas as well. I think that is definitely one weakness of it. But I think the third Grepher doesn't fix that issue, but it makes it a little bit better. And I don't exactly know what cards would come out, but I think like having the ability to just be proactive and close out games much more quickly is just way too strong in this format. I think it's why Blackwings, it might be like the only reason why Blackwings is an S tier deck, because even if your hand isn't good, like let's just say it's like a Bora and like some follow up, that will get you over the goal line in a lot of games just because you can like normal summon attack and put enough pressure on the opponent in like a very, very inconsistent format like Edison. And I think that additional Grepher would allow Vayu to do the exact same thing. So now that we've talked about coping, I've been pounding the table on what I call Rev Hybrid Blackwings for a very long time. I think this honestly very well could be the best deck in the format. Despite me being the only person that is playing it right now, like I think this very well could be the best deck in the format, and I'll explain why. So the first thing I want to caveat is that I think this deck is only a few cards away from being a significantly worse Blackwing deck. I think there is an extremely, extremely thin line between a hybrid, let's call it Rev Hybrid Blackwings, being an S tier deck and just then also like just jettisoning down to like the bottom of tier 1. It's a very, very thin line. And that's what concerns me. Like when people start messing with the deck, like I don't think a lot of people really understand how each part of the engine is basically built and how those parts interact, because you're only a handful of cards off from just making your deck worse. I think it does so many things well. First of all, one of the big benefits of Vayu is that it plays deck dev extremely well. It gets it live extremely well. Blackwings does as well, but not as consistently as Vayu. My hybrid lists push that deck dev over the edge. You can pop off deck devs more frequently than Vayu, because you're not only getting the Sirokus and the Greffers and the Vayus, but you also get Kalutes, you get Blizzards. It's like impossible not to have a live deck dev unless it's like super late game and you're just like top decking it or something. The other issue is that Vayu plays under its oppression generally a lot better than Blackwings. Hybrid plays under its oppression flawlessly. The third big benefit of Rev Hybrid is the ability to play Dad consistently, way more consistently than Blackwings, because you have tons of grave manipulation. You get Burial, you get additional ways to send with Arma, Grepher, Necro, you get the Blizzards. So like the ability to just pop off Dads, not only getting them off, but popping them off at the right time, which is what Vayu has the ability to do, is significantly better than Blackwings. So the other point with Blackwing Hybrid, or let's call it just Rev Hybrid, is Shit, I lost my train of thought. There was one final point. Um, oh yeah, but starters. So the games you lose with Blackwing, you lose typically because you don't have enough monsters, and this is a recurring theme with Edison, especially over the last few months. Which traps are out. Like traps are not what they used to be. Trapstones are everywhere. Sweepers are everywhere. And if you want to win the game, you kind of have to outsack your opponent. And the problem that Blackwings has is you don't consistently enough have the bird hands. And those are the hands where you open and you get like a Shura, a Clute, a Blizzard, like an Icarus, or like maybe it's just like a Bora, Icarus, Blizzard, or something like that. If you do test hands with Blackwings, the bad hands run 100 test hands, and make note of the bottom 25% of your hands, like come up with a scoring system on like 1 to 5. The vast majority of your bad hands with Blackwings are the hands where you don't have a monster. So I think if every Blackwing list cut the crap and just added, at a bare minimum, 1 Rhoda, 1 Grepher, 1 Arma, and 1 Necrogardna, and then Burial's up for debate depending on how you build the rest of your deck, but if it just added those 4 cards and cut none of the other Blackwings, so you're at like 21 cards roughly. So you cut like maybe a Yata-Garasu, Legacy of Yata-Garasu or 2, and maybe like a Dimpriz. So that puts you at like 21 monsters. Again, I'll count out the 4. 1 Grepher, 1 Rhoda, 1 Arma, and 1 Necro. Your opening hand quality skyrockets. Your extenders skyrocket because you get 1 card, grave setups. You get like 1 card arm wings. Like I don't think there's any world where if you're comparing like Hybrid's opening hand, if you just add those 4 cards and you cut the other junk out of your deck, you don't even have to make it like a full Hybrid deck. You just make it Hybrid Light. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that it's better than Blackwing Pure. It solves so many of the other issues. It makes you get non-gameless and you create more non-games. Like it's the solution that Blackwings needed, and I'm really frustrated to see deck building choices with Blackwings going in the opposite direction. Again, if you want to play Blackwings, play 25 matches and just cut the draw traps and add those 4 cards, and you won't go back. I promise you, you'll never go back. Your hand quality will go way up, and your deck is considerably more cohesive. So that is what I had to say. Let's do a quick review. I think the top 2 decks of the format are Vayu and my hybrid list. I think runner-up is Blackwing Pure. I think there are, frankly, way too many deck-building errors at this point. The deck is headed in the wrong direction. Forg, I think, in terms of raw power level, is undoubtedly the best deck in the format. I think there are, unfortunately, a handful of copers that don't really want to put in any additional work. They just think their job is done and don't want to change the deck. But if somebody that really wants to has the time and effort to make like a really, really good Forg list, I think it could even move up within the S tier. And whether or not that's a conversion side or a non-conversion side, I don't know. I personally think it's a non-conversion side. Like if you're going to do the unfair stuff and you lose to Crow, like might as well just like play into your lose con even more. Like if they have Crow even in your conversion side, like you're probably going to lose anyway because like the literal only bomb card you have is Caius. You get 1 bomb. And then if they have Crow, it gets Avarice. Or if you have Avarice, it gets Crowed. That's your other bomb card. In tier 1, I think this is right in terms of ordering. Like Frog Hero, it does kind of have everything going for it. I just think in a vacuum, it looks like probably the best deck of the format. I think in practice, in reality, with the way the meta is shaping up, it's at the top of tier 1. Lightsworn Pure is criminally underplayed. I think it's, in terms of raw power, one of the most powerful decks in the format. Unfortunately, I think good players shy away from it just because they want more control and they don't want to win just via sacking. But I think more players should play this, especially if they're below average or just don't have a lot of time to really get good. GBs, I think in terms of, again, like deck refinement or professionalization is like by far like the worst build. Like the builds just suck. Like whoever's building these GB decks, like you're fired. Like you're fucking fired. Like figure it out. Giga, I think there's still a lot of really hard work being put into Giga. I just do think it, which is a good thing, by the way, I think it has a lot of room for improvement. And once that like magic formula is found, I think you're going to be seeing a lot more Giga. Dragon Turbo, I don't think there's all that much room for innovation with this. I floated the idea in like a previous video of like Dark World Dealings, which I think is kind of interesting, but that card, of course, is very flawed in a lot of ways. But if you're going to like go for the sack, maybe just go with that. I don't know if that's correct or not. Dream Frogs is, as a control deck, probably the most powerful deck in the format behind Hero Frogs. It just has too many like classic frog problems. Traditional hybrid kind of just is Blackwings, so it's good enough. Despite my build being way better, and then like any frog deck is basically automatically in tier 1. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching.